Your brother told us how you be all into reading and shit. Hey, that's some real good shit. Congratulations.
Did you just congratulate me for reading?
All right, and we're live yet again for another lethal discussion.
Woo.
Yeah, this one is another act of love because for some reason reality does not want us to have these episodes.
The filmed ones, our mic broke, so we couldn't film like the actual video, and it was gonna be Jose had found a really cool location, so it's too bad, but we're still making it work.
Yeah, exactly. It's all about the ideas, and the ideas don't need pictures.
That's true. Use your mind.
Mm-hmm. So what is it that we're talking about today, Kevin?
Yeah, so I brought up this topic. I think it's really interesting. Basically, human programming and metaprogramming, probably.
Okay. In the confines of what, like what layers? It's like biological programming. It's like the MK Ultra situation. Where you can like.
I think all of the above.
Yeah.
We kind of touched on it when we were talking about in the Westworld episode, right? Mm-hmm. And how we are habits, right? And we have all these habits or beliefs or self-limitations that we kind of find ourselves with. Sometimes you don't even know where we got them from. It's just something that, developed with you.
And we begin to characterize ourselves alongside the lines of those parameters, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. It becomes your ego,
Yeah.
The way you see yourself. And I thought it, basically, based on our last topics, it kind of goes hand in hand with our psychedelics episode or our experiences episode. Mm-hmm. I don't remember what we ended up calling that.
I think both. Psychedelic experiences.
Yeah, that and the Westworld stuff, and just more delving into what it means to be conscious and unconscious, per se, because a lot of our habits we find are just these things that just run so autonomously we're not even aware, right?
Especially being your own person, in consideration that what exactly is it that makes me be me and not you, and if we were both to do the exact same actions over and over again, would there really be any form of distinction in terms of like what could then be used as a proper character anchor to make you a unique person if you're doing the exact same actions as everyone else? I think that's always one of those like critiques toward consumerism kind of things, where when everybody has the exact same item, where everybody has the exact same type of desire, there is no diversity or plurality in terms of the ideas or necessities that people have, because the old truism is that necessity is the mother of creativity or something like that, and it's like depending on what you perceive to be the most important thing to go after, like that's how your programming itself will also then recharacterize itself along those lines. Because if you are the kind of person that doesn't believe that you can do things, you'll run the kind of programs that then completely make that
feedback to that idea about yourself. Yeah, it's really interesting how things self-regulate themselves. We have this innate herding mentality as well with humans to kind of fit in, right? Do what everybody else is doing, what you're talking about. But at the same time, there's also, I feel like, something that's not talked of as much, which is the counter of it, where there's also this feeling to disagree.
Disagree how? In terms of not being a conformist in relation to like whatever the herd is telling you?
Well, you can kind of already tell there's this innate drive to distinguish yourself, your own identity, your own kind of uniqueness outside of what everybody else is doing. Do you ever feel that when you're talking to somebody and he's trying to say his opinion, you're always looking like, what's my thing that I can say and like have so we can have a kind of discussion, right? So you're looking for yourself, not like, I feel like you do it without even thinking, that you're trying to find what's my own angle so I can have a point here and be like, but this is the way I think about it, right? And perhaps our cultures, or like humans, basically regulate themselves like, well, the majority will agree, but there'll be the fringe, there'll always be this normative curve of how people fall, in every issue, because there's that whole, you ever feel it where all your friends are agreeing, and it's like, well, this isn't fun. I want to have my own kind of like, you're looking for your own kind of angle.
It's just like the spirit of being a contrarian, or like the spirit of negation.
Right, just to play the devil's advocate.
Exactly, because we can't play a game if everyone's on the same team all the time.
Exactly.
And it seems like we're getting better, and we're getting better at being able to characterize ourselves in those kind of games of, I think this way, you think that way, as long as it doesn't devolve into violence, because.
Yeah.
Because everyone does have different modalities in terms of how they go about thinking about the same facts. You and I could be told the exact same facts about a particular thing, yet we could completely characterize that entirely differently within our mind. Like if we heard that somebody got robbed in some part of town, and then that part of town then becomes bad because we heard one action from that area now recontextualizes that whole programming inside your own head as to what you perceive your environment to be like. Even though, for example, let's say that when you look at statistics, it's like 100 and 100,000 people get robbed in a really bad place, and then you start thinking about that. It's like, dang, like only one person every 10,000 out of every 10,000 people gets robbed, and it's like. Although that does make it a dangerous place to live because it can happen, at the same time, when you start really like making the granular numbers and checking,
it's still unlikely. I always think about it that way too. It's like, well, people still live there. It can't be that, like, people are surviving there, so it can't be like, that bad to the point that everybody is like 50% of the people are just dying for
Exactly.
People are still able to make it work, so why not?
It only takes a couple bad actors for that entire area to then just gain this entire new narrative to the macro world, and it reprograms entirely all of society around it, because now they don't get as much funding, and then when you don't get that much funding, you get another positive feedback loop of decay, where because of one narrative, that narrative now changes the entire means of structuring what we consider to be that city's program. It's
the feedback cycle. It is interesting because people expect it, they treat it like that. Then the people who were there act like that because this is how we're getting treated. Kanye West talked about it recently. You remember we were talking about? I showed you that clip. He was on the Jimmy Kimmel show and he was talking about the simulation. He was saying like, when we're kids, and you jump on that coffee table and someone tells you, hey, like, tell this kid to act right. You gotta act properly. It's like, you're a kid and you don't give a damn about a coffee or a table, and you're just doing you, But here's a feedback loop of like, basically confirming that programming of like, this is how you must act, right? And everybody gives you that kind of thing. Now you're having to worry about, okay, next time you come to this coffee table, what's the opinion? Here's all these limitations now, even when you're by yourself, and no one would really like get on you, but that programming structure has already taken off.
Yeah, you already begin to solidify what you think to be the rules
Right.
in terms of like, well, that's a coffee table, I don't stand on it, or people will say something about it.
There's always that example they use about the elephants, where they train elephants when they're younger. They like tie them down really hard, and if they try to move, they'll beat them with,
shit.
And eventually the
Don't go to
elephants,
circuses, people.
the elephants get so well trained and programmed that I can't move from this spot or I'll get hurt. that later on all they have to do is tie the rope. When they get huge, they just tie the rope on this small little thing that definitely can't hold an elephant, but the elephant has been so well
It's
conditioned.
psychologically anchored at
Right.
that point.
It's so well conditioned
Yeah.
that it won't really try it. It won't ever try it, even though it can wreak havoc now.
Exactly. It has the brute strength
It
to
has
do
it,
so.
no one would be able to stop him.
But
They've been
it can't bring itself to do it anymore because
Right.
the fear,
the mental, yeah.
from infancy essentially, and talk about programming right there, right? It's
Right.
being able to dissuade a 2-ton creature from using its mass in order to be able to like get away the way it wants to, because obviously the elephant will probably still want to.
Right.
It's just I can't do it anymore. It's like
It's like I can't, like it maybe doesn't even remember why. It just knows it can't.
It's like
you
Theon
know?
Greyjoy from
Yeah,
Game of Thrones,
exactly.
just like a perfect distillation
I'm
of
a goddamn elephant. You wake up one day, it does some psychedelics. It's like I'm a goddamn elephant. Gets
Yep.
out of there.
It's like your name's Reek Elephant.
Yeah.
Oh man.
So I thought it'd be an interesting discussion about the whole Pavlovian nature of programming.
Because we're not too far off from an elephant in terms of like
Oh, definitely not.
cerebral brain power and also our communal means of thinking, because already elephants have the good characterization of wanting to please the group, kind of, right? It's like they're a herd animal that likes to exist within a cohabitable space with other people or other things at least. So you manipulate that by then beating them in order to be able to keep them in line.
Right.
And then it's like, and then obviously it ends up working because it's it like touches upon some sort of weird mammalian desire, right? Because it's like I can't imagine being able to do that with a lizard, like trying to beat a Komodo dragon to keep it to like stay in one place. I don't know if the reptilian mind like that would actually be
You train it.
be trainable to that aspect. Because for the most part, the things that I hear, right, it's like Pavlov's dog and like things with mice and stuff like that. And it's like mammals are so new in the genetic like environment in terms of our cerebral like cognition and evolution that I don't know how far back you can retrograde the potentiality for like manipulation. It's like, can you train a lizard to like do the things it wants?
Maybe. Maybe if you use the pleasure.
Yeah, the pleasure. Yeah.
Instead of like negative reinforcement.
Yeah,
where it just knows. I'm not sure, but you're right. They usually don't use reptilian minds for the mazes and training, salivating, bells, whatever the whole Pavlovian training usually goes.
Exactly. It would be really interesting to know exactly how far back in the evolutionary line that started happening, that you actually can
It's
begin
actually
to...
even more powerful with humans because where an elephant might need multiple, situations to start learning, like, okay, maybe I can't do this, where a human just needs words, because now that you have language, you can generalize much more quickly. I have a friend who always tells me, man, I used to love drawing back in the day. Like, I really wanted to draw, but I made this drawing for my mom, and she just she basically threw it away in front of me.
Oh, what? Okay.
And from then, I just thought, like, damn, I'm terrible at drawing, so I never drew again, right? So I was like, wow, just that one instance changed your whole programming. It's like, I guess this isn't me. I'm not a drawer. I cannot get better at this. And you set a new limitation right there. A new, I'm trying to use a programming word.
No matter what, it doesn't even really matter. It's like, especially getting that kind of
parameter.
Yeah, there you go, parameter. Yeah, like getting that feedback from your creator. It's like it's one thing, to get a friend to be like, yo, this is okay, dude. Like, thanks, I appreciate it, right? And like, they throw it away eventually.
Yeah.
But it's like that's your mom, and it's like you expect them to be able to give you some sort of,
especially at that developmental stage, and you're really looking for the validation from your parents.
Yeah, because at that point, it's like it kind of falls into that unfortunate mentality that we have, that talent is still like an innate thing that just comes to you, as opposed to something that is practiced along long period of time. And it's like if you cut people at the knees, like you said, and they reparameterize themselves to be like, I'm not a drawer. My mom told me I'm not a drawer.
Right.
And it's like, if I can't even get my own mom hyped up on what I'm doing, it's like, how am I gonna go and get the rest of the world excited or interested in what I'm doing? Especially if you're trying to do that art as like a reciprocal enterprise, right? Like trying to give it to other people, like we are here.
Yeah. Jordan Peterson talked about the whole role the parent plays. I think he was bringing up Carl Jung and Freudian psychoanalytics psychoanalysis, when he talks about, I think they both talk about that you have to kind of defeat your parents. That Oedipus story of, you have to almost kill your parents before you can really become your own.
Yeah, right. I like
figuratively kill.
Right. I like his little quote, and I don't know if he's cribbing that from them. That like no boy becomes a man until their father dies.
Right.
That kind of.
Yeah. That, I think we must have listened to the same lecture. I remember him saying that, and I guess that kind of stage of. When a child is born, that whole developmental stage, you're mostly being programmed by your parents, mostly, right?
If you're lucky.
Yeah, usually, right? The normal kind of way that we all kind of think it goes, parents come in and they teach a kid values. This is how you act. This is where you're going. Sure, you'll have other influences like your friends that'll come in, but most of the time you're looking for that validation from your parents. So yeah, after that figurative,
victory over your parents.
Yeah, coming into your own. I think this is a stage that I'm more interested in, is the metaprogramming, right? If we can say your personality up to the point where you become self-conscious of your, knowing yourself and getting outside of your creator's shadow, right? Your parent's shadow. Now it's when the program becomes aware of itself, right? If your ego is its own program, now it's like, all right, it's going to do metaprogramming. And the definition for metaprogramming is when programs are restructuring or making new or modifying existing programs, right? So the machine programs itself. And it's interesting for me because I am a developer. So it's kind of like when you write situational code and you are expecting that code, if something comes up, it's going to handle its own thing, It's going to be able to like, oh, we need to modify this, right? Without you having to touch anything. And this is useful for programmers because it makes us not have to write as much code.
Obviously,
right? Directly.
It's about the quality, not the quantity.
Right. So if we ourselves are programmed, then that fun part comes when what John C. Lilly talks about. He has a book called Programming and Metaprogramming the Human Biocomputer. And he talks about, he was a psychonaut, like big... used to get he was a pioneer of the sensory deprivation tanks. He used to drop like LSD 25 and get in there and just explore the depths of his soul.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he came out with the
Sounds
whole...
exhausting.
Right. Came out, oh yeah, he had so many trips, and he like went really scientific about it, logged everything, had a team, like people were funding this. It's kind of crazy, right, in the 60s when they could get away with this stuff. And came out with a book, like very thorough, very scientific about how this programming is kind of done. And he had the belief where psychedelics actually gave you that awareness, that meta-awareness of the programs that you have. More vividly or more really more, I don't know,
like visceral, just like it's just more there.
It's more there. You're more aware of it, and you would be able to change these programs, these habits, right? That you felt like you had no control over. I think he had some programs in which he'd help people stop smoking, do stuff like that. He'd do sensory deprivation and LSD treatment to rewrite those habits for them.
Okay.
Right? So
it's pretty much defeating old code and trying to re-scrub it
Right.
with new things. Yeah, that's all of that stuff is so obvious, right? How we really can be just pretty much reduced down to the conceptualization of a flesh robot that does.
Right.
And and it's also very interesting if we can backpedal a little bit back to that whole like the Oedipal story of
Oedipus. Yeah.
yeah, of your mother or your father, eating you essentially because they have a child but they want that child for themselves as
Right,
opposed to
that's true.
as opposed to pretty much just having the child to groom it to be another actor in the world. They're like, no, this one's mine. Like you essentially eat the child's will at that point by making them be so by having all of their programs be completely looped around yourself. Like you
Right.
can't go out without asking your mom. You can't go out because your parents are gonna be completely angry or whatever. And that stuff, as we said, it's just like the reinforcement of that thought process continuously. Then, as you said, it would be like situational code, where it would just I'd imagine it just it goes in automatically without you even thinking about it anymore. Like
Right.
it just becomes an autonomic thing. Like I'm a anxious person because my mom, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I'm always worried that my mom might have been dead for like 5 years, but I still have the worry that she's gonna burst in through that door and like start
Yeah.
yelling at me or like beat me or something like that, or my father's gonna do that to me.
Right.
And that never goes away. It's like that. I'm never really sure how to characterize PTSD, but that's what I would consider PTSD. That's what I would consider to be PTSD, like something that isn't just going to automatically happen, but you're still so
Right,
anxious
it's-
about
yeah,
that.
it still has that physiological trigger when you get anything similar to that. I think John C. Lilly was talking about that in his book. I think I was reading it this morning to prep for this, and it was talking about how, if your parents used to beat you in a room with like a green carpet, right?
Yeah.
Or it's a small room.
Yeah.
Anytime you're in those rooms, you'll get triggered. You'll be like, and you don't even know why anymore. But those things, those parameters that have been programmed by your parents in those situations to elicit fear, elicit anxiety, are still triggered by those things, right?
Especially if you got beat randomly, because it's one thing.
That's
it's,
right.
yeah, it's one thing to like an elephant, as we were saying,
Yeah.
like get beat and understand that I'm not supposed to do this thing, and like the beating stops if I don't do this thing. But just existing constitutes a beating. It's like, what exactly is your brain then going to do, except being like, what caused this beating? Was it because of the green carpet? Don't enter rooms with green carpets. But like, it's obviously that's what causes it. There's
Yeah,
no.
if it's random. You'd
Yeah.
hope like parents wouldn't randomly beat their kids.
Oh,
and that.
well, yeah, okay, yeah, you'd hope. You'd most certainly hope. But there's enough people out there that like the probabilities that somebody's actually doing it are high. And I think what's important is that if you are a potential person that's listening to us right now and you had a childhood like that, I think it's very reinforcing to know the fact that you're not stuck there. Those kind of things there are means to be able to either
Right,
bypass those
yeah.
programs
get
or learn to be able to cope with them and like integrate that shadow, I guess, of yourself. And
Yeah, that's the cool part because the programs what John C. Lilly demonstrated and others when it came to stuff like neuro-linguistic programming, if you've ever heard of that, NLP, was that they found that these behaviors, phobias especially, PTSD type of scenarios, could be rewritten like within hours or in a few sessions.
I've seen that about rat phobias. I had a huge rat phobia as a child,
Uh-huh.
and I started once I came of age. I decided that although rats are scary, like they can hurt if they come
do
and
have-
attack
yeah,
you.
They do have
They do have
diseases. and
exactly. It's like there's
warranted.
there's plenty of things to stack that make it a logical fear, but at the same time, to the point that I couldn't even watch them on screen or like
Yeah.
look at a piece of paper that had a rat on it, and I was
Yeah.
like, okay, well
That's irrational.
Yeah, that's irrational, right? So I started learning about the slow developing of being like, first look at a picture and understand that the picture isn't hurting you,
Right.
you know, and you can look at the picture to the point that you get bored of the picture,
Right.
and then it's like, yeah, like those automatic programs that are like, no, like that's like you're
Right,
like you're in
fear.
danger, you know, it's
Yeah.
like no, they turn off. It's like eventually you can
Right.
begin introducing things, and
That's
then I had a friend who had a pet rat. And I went over to their house, and I would let the rat like just get on top of me, and they're like, "Yeah, the rat won't bite you," and I would just let the rat like climb
Yeah.
on top of me, and then I would have precedent of the fact that, once again, although rats can be scary, it's, you know, not every rat, you know, like,
Right.
and
It's not worth it having an irrational fear
Mm-hmm.
of them in every scenario.
to the point that the archetype of a
Just
rat
the
in the
idea.
form, yeah,
And that's the thing that was
Yeah.
incredible that they were talking about, that the idea is what you're afraid of, right?
yeah,
It's
the form, yeah,
the form
the
of
platonic form.
it. So that was really interesting, and so the more I started looking into that stuff, it seemed really interesting to me that how powerful is that you could rewrite your behaviors if you knew how that kind of stuff worked, right? If you knew how you installing certain beliefs or installing certain limitations on yourself or rationalities, and knowing how to rewrite them, you know, then you could leverage that to your your advantage to become a much better person. And I would listen to these.
Because I mean, I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but if we're gonna keep it within the theme of, you know, like programming in the digital and the anatomical sense, it kind of feels like that, like the phobias are like just malware that you just pick up, you know, just
Right.
going through the
Viruses.
environments of the
It's
websites
definitely
that are
viruses.
the
Because the ideas are viruses,
Mm-hmm.
especially if a negative limiting idea
and it's just
hold.
a recursive, yeah, it
Yeah.
puts you in a recursive loop of like, no, like blue screen of death all over, you're like, oh gosh, I gotta go home, and now I'm on the floor, you know?
It's crazy how, like, even just off remarks you just randomly, like, why do I remember this person's off remark all the time? I remember someone told me, like, oh man, Old Spice deodorant's terrible, you shouldn't use Old Spice deodorant. I was like, man, screw you.
Yeah.
At the time I was thinking that, but for some reason kept on going in my head until a point where I would think twice, and then, should I get Old
Oh.
Spice deodorant? I don't even know why. I was like, I would just find myself like, oh, I shouldn't buy this because
You heard the scent, yeah.
right. And it had just something that had just gotten installed, this new belief.
I think that might have to do with the fact that, for the most part, when we go through life, the majority of things are kind of neutral. Nobody really has an opinion about X thing. Until you hear an opinion about it. You're just kind of going through the paces, being like, okay, what's a good deodorant? Old Spice, you know, like it's on, you know, it's on ads. You hear about it and stuff,
Right.
and for the most part, you consider it to be the normal thing to buy, until eventually you hear one person say, like you did, like hear one bad thing about it, and now all of a sudden it
It's colored your perception.
yeah, it entirely restructures what you consider to be a good choice. And the fact that something, like you said, something so flippant, like somebody's
Old Spice.
somebody's just one little sentence out of a sudden now is pretty much causing like economic shifts in the actual market, because now you're not buying Old Spice, and who
Right.
knows what you might be saying, who knows how many people that person is saying that to.
Right.
And slowly but surely, like those you know, like one
That's
little
why
thing.
advertising is so powerful, because they're literally programming you. And you watch television programming, it's kind of interesting that
Yeah, that they
you
even-
think
and they're
about
so
it.
blatant
They're
about
so
it.
blatant about it. Because you're right. Most of the time, you don't know the opinion thing that you brought up is true. You don't know, with all the choices out there, with all the things that you don't know about. It's like which way, one or the other. It's only when someone comes with an emotional statement, it's like, no, the Old Spice is really good, it gets you the girls. You have this, oh, I can relate it to that. That's a relatable thing.
Yeah.
And they trigger those well-worn pads in neurology to install their ideas into your head. It's like, yeah.
And it's such a crapshoot too, because you hear about the fact that for the most part, when it comes to advertising, it's like the majority of the money is wasted hoping that it's going to be able to get that one thing that's going to land inside of your head, because they're just pretty much like machine gunning like ads at
Hopefully,
you, hoping one of those stick, hoping something actually shifts your mindset to wanting to get a particular brand.
I think the ones that are most successful are so like when you see them, you're like, of course this is gonna work. Attention grabbing. They're entertaining. They put the right amount of subliminal visuals into it, and they got their message across in some NLP kind of command way. Yeah, buy Coke. You know.
Yeah.
They're like, well, it's like you've just taken on a command, right? And you find yourself doing it, or if you find yourself wanting it subconsciously. You know, it's almost like they skip the observer, your consciousness, and just get
going
right
for
to
the id.
Yeah,
going direct. And like, hey, id. Like, now that the ego and super ego are out of the room, let's talk Coke. Come on, let's go get it.
Because we talked about this during the Westworld episode. I think I brought it up. There's this kind of awareness that you have where these commands just come out from your body almost.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I feel tired, or I feel like I need a drink, or I want sugar right now, randomly from everywhere, right? And you can separate the consciousness, who you are, versus your body's needs. You're like you're feeling this and that, right? And it's almost like you are the one who is getting. You're a passenger in your own vehicle. You know what I'm saying? And it's almost like there's this driver who is yourself in a sense, but you're not aware of where those things are coming from. I think I was most confronted with that when I fasted for 7 days, just a water fast, and realized how much the programming was, especially around food. And it wasn't that because if you know anything about fasting, after the third day, pretty much your body switches to burning ketones, so burning the fat on your body. And typically most humans have probably around enough fat to be good without eating for like 22 days. 22 or 28, I can't remember. So 7 days wouldn't be anything big or harmful to you.
It wouldn't be harmful, but
it wouldn't be harmful to you.
But it would
like barring you didn't have any like kidney problems and
right, exactly, or like diabetes. Yeah.
So there was a point where I hit after the third day, I'm not hungry. There's no actual physical hunger. It's more psychological, just addiction almost, you know?
Because how are you going to spend your time?
And it would actually be triggered by actions where I would expect to get food, kind of like the Pavlov's dog.
Oh shit!
So
you're like the Skinner box rat, essentially. You're like, come on, I press the button. Where's my food at? You're like, where's my food?
Exactly. And my triggers were I'd be at work. Obviously, when everybody's going to lunch, I'm like, all right, I got over that pretty quick. But mine was going home, because there's this kind of expectation when you're at work, and then you go home, and then you're like, let me eat, feel good about myself. I've been working hard all day, and get this kind of dopamine boost from the food.
Right.
Now, when I found out, like, food's not on my mind at all. I'm thinking about something else. But as soon as I walk through my door, all the triggers go, and then suddenly I'm I'm hungry, and I find myself going to the fridge, and I'm like, wait a second, I'm fasting. Fuck. And I'm like, no, I'm not gonna eat, and then I get so depressed, then my whole physiology just starts going that way, negative, like, oh, you're not gonna get this reinforcement, you're not gonna get that kind of dopamine
that makes
boost
sense.
of eating.
The food itself begins to have a bit of nested pleasures inside of it.
Right.
That go much further than just, oh, I need food in order to be able to survive. It's like, I need food because, as you said, I went to work and like I deserve this. And
I think a lot of people can relate to that too, just coming in your house and quick going to the fridge.
Yeah.
You're like, wait, I don't even need to eat. You just
Yeah.
find yourself at the fridge, you're like just looking there, you know? And that was a similar situation where I was just confronted with like, oh wow, I have all these subconscious innate programs that just happen without me even thinking about it.
Yeah, and are they even desires really if you don't even have a real choice in wanting them?
Right.
At that point, it is just pretty much an addiction. It's like, because where do you draw the line in terms of what you actually want and what you perceive to only want because it's going to give you that dopaminergic boost
Right.
that anything could. I mean, another thing could give that to you.
I
But
think that's why the whole idea of mindfulness or awareness is really interesting, because that whole experience of fasting made me like aware of those. I felt like normally I'm not aware when those things are happening. I just eat. It's just a thing that I do. I don't like. You kind of convince yourself it was your own idea that you needed to eat, not some subconscious subroutine that was just run food protocol, as soon as you go through your door.
especially
Now when I wasn't eating,
Yeah.
it was apparent, and I'd be like, the request would come up almost like you're using your computer and some window pops up like, hey, it's eating time, and you're like, close window. And I would literally have to do that within my own mind, like, nope, close window, we're fasting. It's like, oh, okay. And find the dopamine from some other activity, right?
Yeah, I would imagine that would be pretty tough, especially considering that food and eating is such a visceral part of existing that it's so ingrained in how you go about conceptualizing both your day and how you how the means by which you go about making yourself feel better.
Right.
They're so
It's ingrained into survival.
Yeah.
To start denying those kind of carnal desires of eat, survive is kind of, it was difficult in the beginning. I would say that it kind of got easier, but I felt like I was getting some admin privileges in my own mind that I didn't know that I had before, and that felt very powerful. It felt like, okay, if I can do this, I can do anything, right? If I ever get into a situation that's like, oh, I don't think I can do this. I don't think I can run that far. I don't think I can focus that long, And then
you always have a precedent of something you've already done that is very hard.
Right, where I could just be like, oh,
You
of course.
parameterize yourself. There you go.
Right, you're giving yourself
Yeah.
a new option here, So that's the metaprogramming. When the program is aware, you are the machine, but when the machine becomes aware, now things get interesting.
Yeah, and there's a lot of power in just being honest with what you really are. Because once you understand yourself as a programmable machine,
Right.
then you, as you said, like begin to have those admin privileges of being like, okay, now you're not just running autonomic functions. Now you can actually begin to have some sway as to the kind of functions we should actually be spending our time doing.
Yeah.
And for the most part, growing as you grow up, everything is kind of given to you. It's like you go to school and you're supposed to listen, and whether you do so or not, it comes down, that aspect, I suppose, comes down to you. But does it really? Because if your temperament is just the kind that doesn't learn from sitting down, like that's just not, auditory listening is not the means by which you are best best learn, then I mean it's not doing anything for you. You get jittery, then they're like, oh, this kid's got ADHD. It's
Right.
like you gotta dull them up.
That's always the thing whenever I come to those stories where it's like, well, I don't have the temperament for something, and I always question those now, because now I wonder, is this something that is an installed, like, why would I think that I can't, this is how do you have a regular, how do you even measure that? It's like, yeah, this kid, it doesn't have that temperament, right? Or is it something that in the same way where you're walking to the fridge and you convince yourself, oh, it was my own idea to go because I was hungry, right? But it was actually your body, just maybe you've done it so many times that you've conditioned yourself, and then you would have cognitive dissonance if you're like, well, I didn't make this decision just now, right? So you convince yourself that it was, yeah, I wanted to be here. Oh, yeah, it's just because I wanted a fruit or something.
Well, that's what you're doing all the time, no matter what. And that's one of those things
Right.
that people that are like anti-free will always bring up is the fact that all of your decisions, for the most part, happen before you ever say them or before they actually
you're
become
right.
like a conscious thought inside your head, where now it's a sentence that I'm like, I'm going to go do this. Like,
When it comes to the temperament thing, I question that to be like, okay, is that real? Is that like,
What, temperament?
is that kind of limitation actually real? Where, like for me, I was that kid for sure. Like if I sit down too long, I'd get bored. If the thing wasn't stimulating, the story I always told myself was like, look, I get bored and I get tired and I'll fall asleep, right? There's nothing I can do about this. It happens every time. I'm powerless to stop this scenario. But when I started becoming more aware of these metaprograms, I was like, well, this has always been a story I told myself, but can I adopt a different belief about myself? And once I started doing that, and actively going against that program, obviously it'd be hard to go against the grain, but I was able to flip the script by just thinking like, no, I don't believe in that limitation. Maybe I can do something different, and not going like with that. It's a feedback loop, right? That you once you give people that out of like, well, maybe you just don't have the temperament to sit down and learn, right? And then like, yeah, I don't. Yeah, I've never been able to do it all the other times. So
people
I probably just
latch
can't
on to
do
the
it.
victimized
Right.
mentality
And
really
you
quickly.
solidify that limitation in your mind. But maybe the mind is actually really, there's a plasticity there that you can invoke, right? If you allow yourself to. If you allow yourself to go past those limitations. Sure, it might be hard. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but in the same way that people can break addictions and phobias, why can't you break a limitation like a temperament, in a sense, like an ability not to sit down and focus, right? And obviously in our day and age, like, of course people are gonna have this temperament stuff because there's information overload, right? Everything that we've been conditioned to, like our ads are that way. Quick information here, stimulating, surprising, end. The next show, all the scenes are really short and they're quippy and they're, quick information, stimulating thing. So to sit down and be able to focus at a task, you haven't been conditioned that way. It's not that you can't, but the programs aren't there. They have to be like created in a sense. So you have to decide to, all right, let me start from scratch and practice building something where I can focus on a task for a long period of time.
I can agree for the majority of what you said. The only issue that I have is that in terms of the concept of the temperament, is that we all know, even from childbirth, that almost every person is a little different. Like they and that, like, because the temperament comes from way before you even begin to be programmed societally. Some kids have a higher like they're more colicky, like they cry more. Some kids are just more passive in just their way of being. They have higher agreeability, or or some other thing in relation to that spectrum. And although you're right that as you grow older and you begin to have more admin privileges in relation to
Right.
in relation to your temperament, you can then begin to reparameterize yourself. Be like, okay, I am not good at sitting down for a long time. Let's see what I can do in order to be able to fix that. I'm not saying that you're stuck with the way you are, for sure.
I
But-
can agree with you. Like,
Yeah.
people can. That's why I was saying the focus attention programs aren't there, so we can say that's the temperament, right?
Right.
That's where you only have. short
Okay, see, there you
focus,
go. And then
right?
my issue just comes from the fact, if we're sticking to the classroom example, right?
Yeah.
That if you understand that not everyone learns the same way, it's why would you want to keep reinforcing that one modality, right? It's like, I know that it's the most practical modality in terms of like saving money. It's like, you know, you line up all these kids and you just blast information at them, and then you hope that some kids are naturally receptive to sitting there and listening. You know, some people are naturally good at doing that, and then they get the advantage because of the arbitrary nature of what we consider the educational system, because we go with pragmatism as opposed to what should be the actual point, which is to teach you, right? It's like, if you're, you know, not that you shouldn't learn if to be X way, to parameterize yourself to, you know, go with what's happening around you, but if the rest of us were intelligent enough, right, to understand already that everyone's different, and it's like, okay, you got kids that you know, they can't sit still, or like they fall asleep. It's like, as opposed to being like, you need to get better, you know what I mean, and you need to change the way that you are in order to be able to work in this situation, which is true. You know, you do need to readapt yourself. I think that we would be better off if we took that into consideration and then tried to kind of meet them halfway, as opposed to beating them into submission with this one particular program. It's like, well, you don't fall in line with like the Prussian education system that we still have, you know, going on right now from 200 years ago, and you know, and so obviously you're deficient, so you need to get different, you know, you need to be different about it.
Right. I think I would agree with you, especially for kids, because kids don't have that metaprogramming like development for the most part. Like they aren't aware of themselves to that degree, right? They're just trying to make sure the programs they've installed so far are running, you know, are running properly to what, you know, all their influences, right? No, they haven't started thinking about themselves abstractly.
And the only other judges that they have are either people that are so different than them because they're they're adults, you know, or they're this, or they're your peers.
Still developing.
Yeah, or they're your peers that also don't know what the hell they're doing, so they're kind of all just making the game up as they go along.
Right. So it's kind of difficult where should you, so the question is like, okay, should you kind of go along with what they what it seems like they're going as, like, okay, if your child seems like a child who can't focus or whatever, is it like you should indulge it and do the feedback and be like, okay, we just need a new way to learn? I think there is some merit in that, and you can go that way. You'll probably be more successful.
Yeah, right, because it's all about because you're not caving into the kid can't learn. It's just that the kid can't learn in this particular way. Like that's, if we were to restructure the, you know, what we're trying to get at in that way, as opposed to just being like, this kid can't learn.
Right.
You know, it's like, this kid can't learn based on how we're trying to teach him right now.
Right.
Like the sentence ends a little too abruptly beforehand.
Yeah.
Because then you're totally right. Then I fall in line entirely with what you're saying. Is like, you shouldn't indulge the kid, because then you fall into that victimization feedback loop of being like, oh, like, I can't learn, so because of that, like, why should I try that hard? Like, my parents told me I can't learn, so it's like, why? Like, I don't even understand like what I'm hearing anymore. And you're totally right. There's a lot of people that are very that take advantage of the out that being a little bit you know, genuinely victimized by the system that you're living in, because if you're like a hyperactive kid, you don't belong in that, you know, there.
I would agree with you. There's just the I guess from my upbringing, it's hard to draw the barrier draw the line with kids on when it's time, when you shouldn't, like, kind of go with, you know, like you're saying, find a different way to help them and learn, figure out what, you know,
like a
what
tutor and stuff like that.
What are their strengths versus, are you not pushing them hard enough? Because sometimes we tend to be a bit too easy on our kids.
It's true.
And like, I always think that my parents just wasn't gonna deal with my crap. They were just not gonna deal with. This is too hard. I can't do math. And my parents were like, "You're gonna sit here and figure it out."
Oh, I tried to tell my mom that I had dyslexia when she was a little kid. Like, oh, you gotta read harder then. That's all she said to me.
Exactly. And then you're just like, okay, you know, and then in a way, your parents almost are able to push you out of this limitation that you're about to form, and they're like, nope,
no,
we're not going to allow you to form this limitation. Whereas,
And when you're beginning to foster responsibilities, you're looking for any kind of out. Being like,
That's true.
Like, man, like I'm kind of slipping in this class. Like maybe it's
Maybe
because I have maybe it's
that's
because I have
true.
ADHD, or maybe it's
I heard about this. Yeah, it
yeah.
must be that. So
And then you
my
start
parents were-
self-diagnosing.
Exactly, and my parents were just not having that. They're like, "Look, you're a smart, bright child. You should be able to do this." It's like, okay, that's what my mom says. I am this, so.
Aha!
and
See,
then-
you got
right?
you got the anti situation from what your friend got when they got
Exactly. It was
when
a
they threw away
positive
the.
reinforcement where they believe that you can do
It's like, oh, you go and believe it. You-
and now you have to believe it too. Otherwise, you're
Yeah.
not gonna get to have any fun.
yeah.
So that's the line, because I feel like that is valuable. But where do you draw the line where, okay, we've tried that, now let's try something that might be more conducive to their learning style?
Exactly, because because it all comes down to what the point is behind why you're doing all of this. It's like, are you just trying to do it because you want the kid to be a good student, quote unquote, and you want them to, follow the parameters of like sit there and make no noise, but they're not really learning anything throughout the whole time, or it's like, is the point for the child to learn? And if that's the point, then we do have to come in from different angles. It's like trying to, once again, to bring it back to like the programming. It's like everybody works on different operating systems. It's like we all can run word processors on all operating systems, but like the installation might be different. Like there might be bugs that you can't conceptualize from a Windows to a Mac or a Linux,
Right.
and it's like everybody runs on a different. On a
Operating
on a
system.
different operating system, and like they have different processors, that give them the
Yeah.
capacity to be able to run. Like some people are really good at running one thing, right? Like they get hyper efficient and hyper amazing at one little aspect, but then they're antisocial and entirely devoid of emotionality. And it's like,
Right.
that's a robot. Like that's a meat robot for sure.
Jeez, yeah, that's true. You could get to that point. With kids, I always wonder, like, especially growing up, we had all these labels, and in the same way you said, my parents gave me the anti of what my friend got from his parents. That must really hurt some kids, especially in
Yeah.
the way where we, like, even the positive stuff where we have, I don't know if you remember, there was a program, I don't know if they still do it, they have like the gifted and talented program for like kids in elementary school. When you show some kind of promise, you're
Yeah.
reading at a higher grade level, then you're separated from that group, and you get to do special advanced classes because you're showing promise, and you don't want to. Doesn't that kind of mess with everybody else who's not in that, right? 'Cause,
Exactly.
like, I don't have that label, so I shouldn't achieve that. I don't have the ability to achieve that high.
And
right?
and kids are entirely receptive to that, because I
Right,
remember that
definitely. They're soaking
I
it
remember
up.
in 5th grade I got into one of those like talented classes where they would take me aside for like an hour and a half every single day, and then we would go to another classroom with kids from other classes, and then we'd read like harder books and stuff like
Right,
that,
exactly.
or like they'd give us like a bit more intensive writing prompts to like really get at it, and it's like we have to write like real paragraphs, and like like in 5th grade, and it was like, oh.
And it kind of gives you an ego, though.
It does,
for the
exactly, and
talented
that's where I was
group
getting to.
as
It's like
well.
eventually the hour and a half would end, and I'd come back, and the school seemed everybody seemed like they understood that, like the adults, because everybody would try to be hush hush, and they wouldn't say anything in relation to like what they're sending me out to. It's like, but the
Right.
kids knew. It's like, because they asked me, it's like, what did you go do? I was like, we went and read novels. You know what I mean? It's like we went.
Oh, so you're smart.
Yeah, exactly, and then.
I wasn't selected for this. I guess I'm not that smart. Yeah. So
And it's ego bruising really, really quickly. Like
Yeah.
any of that situation when
both
you feel
ways.
excluded.
I mean, it helps the gifted and talented kids because obviously they have this better conceptualization of themselves as being identified as a capable person.
Right.
So it's that feedback loop. Although it kind of like I was in one of those programs. It kind of hurt me later on, where I was like, oh yeah, I'm awesome. All these normal classes are easy, blah blah. And then I hit a roadblock where, oh crap, like I have to study now. Shit.
Yeah, and you never fostered the programming prior to like
having to meet defeat and having to climb back from it. Once it hit me, I was like devastated. Like, what? How can I get this kind of great? Like, how did this happen to me? Because it was so easy before, and I had to build the resilience of
the pride came before the fall. Yeah,
exactly.
Quite intensely.
And then the opposite way, those kids are always thinking of themselves as poor, not that good or average, where
you never really know
the
what
potential is much greater.
You never really know what effect those kind of situations are going to bring to somebody, because you could also, if we want to be optimistic, say maybe one of those kids, a kid that isn't in that class, sees the fact that there's an opportunity to be in that class and be like, maybe if I try really, really hard, I'll be able to get into that class. Like, not everything has to eventually give you like a defeatist outlook. So, and I mean, when you create, I would imagine that as an adult or an educator that actually would genuinely like kids, you would hope that would be like the trickling effect of that situation. Be like, okay, like we're gonna take these kids, you know what I mean, and like they're gonna get the extra rigor that they should be getting, because obviously if not, they're gonna get bored and then they're going to just fall off the wagon later. But then we might also be able to begin like poking at other kids of being like, yeah, like if you want to be in this class, like this is the kind of thing you should do, like.
There's also the cognitive dissonance that comes in with putting these labels on kids, because what ended up happening in situations like this was the kids who were left behind, you telling them that, okay, you're not smart enough or not good enough for this class, then they develop that, whatever, I didn't want to be in that anyways, it's stupid. Or why would you, you guys are nerds or geeks.
They begin to antagonize.
Antagonize the students who are overachieving. And I remember I had that kind of culture happen when I was in a junior high, and I remember there was one kid who was selected for like, we think you're, you should be in this higher, more higher placed English class, but the kid was scared about his image as far as like, what will his friends think, like he's in this nerd class, right? So eventually he's just like, well, I just want to go back, so he could be, because he didn't want to be labeled as one of these smart kids or who was outside of the cool kids group, so it's interesting how these things kind of feed back into just from these labels we put on people.
We're very categorical creatures. Like we
create a hierarchy.
Yeah, we're awesome at tabbing things. Like that's what we're all about. And
and that programming.
And it goes back to tribalistic societies, right? It's like to this day, even though we understand that we don't live in small tribes, we fall into small tribes very, very quickly. And any little thing that can then give you an ability to connect with somebody implicitly is something that you latch onto very, very quickly. Like being a normal kid, right, is kind of a label in and of itself, because you're not one of those freaks that as it has to go take another class, like a new class and stuff like that. And as you said, it's perfect. Everything just feeds back on itself, because every one of those groups wants to reinforce their existence through their
value.
Yeah, through their member. Yeah, and when you lose one of the herd, and they go off into something else, then that, as you said, it puts you into a dissonance of being like, man, maybe I could do that too. Or you go into the pessimism of like, man, screw those people. It's like,
that wasn't fun. It's not even worth it anyways. You
begin to do like a post hoc narrative like shifting of like the situation.
Yeah, we totally do that. Especially like if we're not able to get something that we don't want. Like, what would we do? Naturally, you devalue that thing. It's like, well, I didn't want it anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
It wasn't even that great. Like, why would I want that? So
Yeah, you begin to list off all of the reasons why now you're better off because you didn't get it.
yeah, it's that cognitive dissonance. You protect your ego in that
Yeah.
way.
But and it's a
And your
survival
body.
instinct too,
Yeah.
because I'm sure that your brain is pretty well aware that your psyche is very delicate,
Right.
and you start
Protect you from suicidal
yeah,
thoughts.
exactly, protect you from those suicidal thoughts because things layer, right? It's
Right.
like you never know what could be nested inside that one rejection. Because what does it mean that when the university tells you that they don't want you, right? That it's like, does that mean that you fail both as a student and as a person? And it's like, are you going to be able to actually give forth more like any sort of positive value back to anybody
Right.
when
I mean,
this
it's
institution
wanted.
when this institution of supposed learning doesn't want you to go learn
Right.
there.
Yeah, it could be very defeating, especially even later on in life. I know some people got that whole thing where you have to pass certain standardized tests, MCATs and everything. You're not able to get into you've been preparing for your whole life to get into medical school. You don't get in. It's like, wow, and especially if you continually fail, then your whole value as a person, you can imagine. I had a friend who was depressed for months because they couldn't get into a nursing program and they kept on trying. And that could be, man, because before you're saying, oh, maybe I didn't study hard enough, but now you're confronted with this truth.
With the reality that
Yeah.
maybe you're just really not good enough for it.
And you've built your whole ego around this, so now what?
Yeah, that's really defeating because unfortunately we do a great job of cementing our reality based on our profession or like the occupational
That's true.
dreams that we have.
That's true,
you
and I
know?
think that lowers our quality of livingness, I suppose, to only identify ourselves with what we do for survival. You know what I'm saying? We do as a job.
I think it just comes down to the herd mentality again. Like that's our base programming of knowing that I, as a person, am a very delicate being. Like my body is very delicate, and without other people to be around me to help me do things that I don't have to think about, I'm nothing, right? I'm
Right.
nothing
If
without
I have
the
no
group.
value to the herd, maybe they'll get rid of me, right?
Exactly,
You have to
yeah.
continuously tell yourself you're valuable to the herd. So, yeah, that is crazy. I did want to talk about the psychedelic aspect of this. I thought it was really interesting. John C. Lilly talks about John C. Lilly would conduct a number of experimental trials in which sensory deprivation and lysergic acid diethylamide 25 served as a catalyst for allowing subjects to become aware of their internal programming, an awareness he felt not readily accessible through the standard state of consciousness. Lilly's experiments were designed to help subjects locate and correct problems or bugs in their biocomputer.
And their biocomputer, I love that.
Isn't that funny,
Yeah.
the verbiage that they use here?
Totally. And it really is, once again, all about the means by which we signify things, right? Because if we start looking at ourselves, start being honest with ourselves and being like, I'm a biocomputer, and there are things inside of my software that I could potentially scrub away to be able to be more efficient,
Right.
Or whatever you get to define what efficient means,
Right.
but you
For
want
whatever
it.
goal.
Yeah, exactly. You want it, and at that point, it at least beats the I am pretty much a marble statue that can never change with a horrible defect that will always be there forever.
Right.
Like you said the other day, it's like we're both the sculpture and the statue at the same time. We're
The sculptor and the statue.
and the statue. So we have unfortunately we have the capacity to be able to chip away those imperfections if we're so inclined to do so.
And that state of awareness, I think, I don't know. I mean, you are kind of aware of that, but it's something you know in the back of your head. But I think psychedelics just brings that to the forefront, and it's so clear in a sense that you're playing this role when Kanye says, "Oh, we're all we're all unpaid actors playing roles in someone else's script," but that kind of feeling is where you can kind of see the fragility of your ego and how it was created, in a sense, right? That your identity is so malleable, right? And you can be anybody.
Yeah, to quote Shakespeare, which I'm sure is where Kanye got it from. It's like in life, every man and woman is an actor,
Right.
You know, and they each and in their life they each played many roles,
Right.
and yeah, entirely. And like you want to be able to, as what is it? I think it's Dr. Piaget said you want to be able to play the most amount of games as you possibly can. Like that, your programming isn't to be good at one thing, because a computer can do that, right? It's like a computer can be the best at chess or Go. Like they've already managed to be able to get the unilateral parameters down perfectly. What you're good at is the diversification of games. I mean, I can be okay at chess. I can be great at being a friend. I can be wonderful at being a husband. I can be, you know, all of those things. If you consider them within the parameters of them being games that you can win and then continue to keep playing,
Yeah.
then you can program yourself in order to be able to then be the best player of those games, as opposed to just seeing them as either random, you know, acts happening in a weird chain.
Just utilitarian.
Yeah.
There's a more like it's about the experience of doing it rather than the utility of it. You know? Does that make any sense? Where, like you said, a computer can do something very efficient. Well, what's the point? You know? For us having the experience of, I always tell people, like, yeah, I'm excited about automated cars to an extent, but at the same time, I like driving. So what about the experience? Like, I don't necessarily care if this robot can drive better than me. I like driving, you know? I like playing the game.
You'll be relegated to having to go to a track to be able to do it, like people with horses do now.
Yep.
It's like, if I want to experience this, so I have to go out of the way to do so.
Right.
Yeah, I'm excited for automation so I can read more. Oh my gosh, like
To maximize, the time that you spend on
exactly, because I have to. I dislike driving. I think that it puts me on autopilot because it's like I can't.
I don't
go
like
fast.
driving far
Yeah.
distances, but when I like driving fun cars. You know, like,
Okay, see that's a completely different ball
that's
game.
a different ball game. Yeah, when you have a nice drop top convertible.
Yeah, just beautiful.
Yeah, and it's gonna be interesting when if we hit this post-scarcity like economy where where we do have all these automated. Maybe the whole basic income thing, and robots pretty much do all jobs that are gonna be necessary for survival. It's like where do we start defining our programming then? You know, what are we trying to get good at? What games are we gonna play then?
And I think that's why people, for the most part, are so conservative in relation to changing large-scale societal aspects like that, because you have to consider the programming of the overall people. That it's like, okay, we start giving everybody exactly the amount that you need to be able to handle like food and where you're gonna stay. A lot of people still are unfortunately playing the survival game all of the time. That once you pretty much hand them a win state, they have no means to be able to then restructure. Restructure themselves.
They'll probably hoard it and continue to. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, so but it's one of those things. It's like, if we know that it's a bit of inevitability because we're
Post-scarcity.
Yeah, because we're trying to get more and more efficient.
Right.
To eventually will come a point that we'll be able to output more. Output more resources than we can actually input them at a time. Especially if with people now having higher ability to choose when to have children, and having more options really in relation to what their quality of life is going to look like, means that it'll probably end up coming to that place. So those questions are kind of inevitable. So I think it's best for us to start tackling the questions now before the situation is actually happening around us and we have to pretty much do it with like our heads cut off because. And what does a post-scarcity world even look like? You know, it's like, what does that even like? I
You should
can't.
definitely read the Player of
Yeah.
Games, because that's a society where it's post scarcity. There's not really any idea of money. There's no idea of even um, authority, even the laws.
It's like the perfect anarchism, essentially.
Yeah, it's kind of anarchism, and the leaders of the society are AI minds in a sense, but they also have their own personalities. It's interesting. I think Ian M. Banks does a pretty interesting job of painting a world, or I guess a society in which, because they're spacefaring and they're level 8 society, they're just stupid advanced. And it was really interesting delving into that kind of world and seeing like, wow, that's interesting. Like where the character in that, he has this place. It's really nice. They spend some time describing it, and a ship comes in, and the ships all have AI minds. They can talk. They're basically, the biological entities and the mechanical entities are just, they just consider themselves entities, and they talk to each other like they're conscious, right? They're both conscious. They know they're both beings on the equal standing, and the ship compliments his house. It's like, this is a really nice house, and the guy's like, why would you compliment my house? Everybody can get the same shit I can, you know? Like, there's no, like, this is a post-scarcity world. Like, if you wanted anything in here, like, you could easily get it. Like, it'd be 3D printed and materialized in your place, you know? Easily. There's no, you can't really flex on anybody about when it comes to possessions and stuff.
Okay, yeah.
So how do you play that game? You know, like, now it's like, you know, you have value because you have more stuff than somebody. You know, you have more money than somebody. And that's a common game that a lot of people play, and that's a mainstream game. You know, we're always looking at people's net worths, and what do you do when that is not even relevant?
Yeah, stability seems to be kind of a degenerating game because, yeah, we want to play a game, and in order to be able to play the game, we need to have some parameter of winning and losing.
Right.
And the only way to be able to then get that is you have to like make up this game inside of your head, and it's like, okay, like money doesn't count as a means to be able to like know that I'm winning. It's like possessions don't mean anything. It's like, is it ideas then? Is that,
Yeah.
you know?
That's, I guess, in that book, it becomes kind of like that, where opinions of you, that becomes the new currency in a sense. Like, the main character cares so much about what people think. He's a game player, right? And he writes theories about games, board games, video games, whatever. And he's known in the culture. That's what they call the society.
The
as
culture?
being, yeah, it's culture.
Oh, that's awesome. Just so monolithic.
Yep, the culture as being this great game player.
Okay.
But he's kind of he's a gambler. I think we talked about this before. He's a gambler, and he wants, there's some, like, he wants an element of danger in a sense, and he gets to a point where he decides to cheat on a game, and he gets blackmailed about it by one of these drones who have their own agenda, and he's thinking, man, if this gets out, I'll have to kill myself or something. I'll literally kill myself if people find out, and just ruins my whole like status in the community, like how people perceive me. And that's really interesting to think about, like, that I mean, we already do that now, but that an opinion of you would like really become the defining thing in people's lives, right? Because there's no real danger, there's no real, they talk about having all this advanced technology where it would save you at a moment's, you know, and you know,
Everything's been nerfed. All the corners have been completely.
Yeah. So which way do you express yourself, right? They have drug glands, right? So they could just, if they want to feel some kind of sensation, they could make the drugs in their body, and they have the receptors, right? So
Yeah, see
if
that.
you need the stoned field, you
Yeah.
can make those drugs, and it's everything super cheap.
Yeah, see, that kind of lifestyle just seems so counterintuitive to the way that we live life that
Right.
that it kind of seems like, if anything, even if we got to a point that we could live in a post-scarcity world, we would like create scarcity or like make it up.
Right.
We would mess with the machines to make it so they can't produce at the level that they actually could be producing, just to be able to then create a means for people to still be like, yeah, you still need to go make money. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, things are still expensive. It's like,
these books are really fun because they always juxtapose the culture with like lesser societies or lower societies on the scale of level. What do we call that?
the Kaslov scale or whatever.
How advanced
like
societies
planetary,
are, and then you can see yourself in this alien race of how they care about these things, and then you're like, oh, that's a metaphor for how we are.
For sure.
And how the culture comes in there, and it's like, oh, these guys aren't even advanced enough yet to know that shit doesn't matter.
Yeah. No one's properly nihilistic. Yeah.
Right. I wonder if when we get confronted with that, would we just evolve? I hope our values might evolve, maybe, to a new operandi. It's almost like how we can't perceive a dimension above us because we've just never experienced it. In the same way, we're having a difficulty understanding how would we like exist in a post-scarcity world, because all we've known is scarcity, right? And it's hard to conceptualize how do we make meaning out of it.
Yeah, it's more our lack of imagination than the thing's actual ability to manifest.
That's an optimist way to look at it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, for sure, right? And it's like, that's the only kind of thing that you can hope, really, because the other only instances, we're all screwed, and we should all just might as well kill ourselves now while the game is good, right?
While the game is good.
Yeah, while the game is still okay. So we have, like I'm a person that falls into pessimism very, very easily. Like that's like my modus operandi. But at the same time, if we're gonna ride this all back to programming, I can't presuppose that my primary programming is the correct one, because I have no a priori reason to believe that the way I was created, or like the thing that I manifest as myself, is right, right off the bat. And the only thing that you can use in order to be able to tell whether that's true or not, as far as I've been able to tell, is other people. And when I try to give them, when I try to go into like my very pessimistic thought angling, it usually lands on people, and people agree, but at the same time it seems that it isn't fruitful, because although everybody can understand the fact that we can blurt off information that could then make it so it would feel like all life is meaningless.
Right.
It doesn't actually help the moment right now.
Right. Is it valuable?
Yeah.
And it's also like the game you're playing.
Yeah.
It's like, is it fun playing the pessimist game? And to a point, yeah. Sometimes I used to play that game. There's a point where you get tired of it, though.
It has the same win state every time, I feel.
Right.
That's the thing. And it's such an easy win state is another hard
That's
thing.
true.
Because pessimism and nihilism is just a very simple act of just saying the sentence, nothing matters, I don't matter.
Right.
That's it. And that's the end of that game,
Right.
As opposed to with optimism, be like, I have a goal, and now I have to go forth with it, and I have to believe that goal is going to be completed, and I have to, and it isn't
And
just
it's
being
fun
hopeful.
though, because
Yeah.
sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, and like each loss can make you it may like obviously derail you off the course, but maybe it makes you more hopeful for reinforces your optimism in a sense.
And it's pretty much like the story of the Chinese farmer that we were listening about,
Right.
Alan Watts. If anybody's ever listened to that one, go listen to it. But it just comes to the fact that we can't ever know at the moment whether a good or bad situation actually how it will manifest through time.
Yeah.
Because even though it could seem negative to lose your job or something like that, it's like now it's opened up the possibility that you're taking new interviews, or like like now a company you never even heard of before is like trying to look for you, and like those aspects. And because we're not clairvoyant and we can't see the future.
Yeah, at least I think that makes a better game though, with the optimism then, because with the nihilism, pessimism angle, well then, no matter what happens, you're always looking at it negative. Like it's always gonna suck, right?
Yeah. Because it has to.
It has to. Yeah,
Yeah.
because everything is meaningless. Whereas the optimism, at least there's a game you can play here. It's like, okay, you might lose some. It's like, okay, maybe next time, because you're an optimist.
Yeah.
And when you win, it's like, great. Like, whoa, this is exactly what I expected.
Yeah.
And you're like, all right, well, how will the next thing go? And there's different outcomes, and there's games that you can play from here.
Yeah, it's a philosophy that can iterate itself again through time, as opposed to pessimism, where it's just like, boom, I'm just stuck here.
Yeah. The answer is the same answer no matter what happens.
Yeah, and it also then becomes good for the community too, because once you start spreading optimism, as long as it's not like misguided optimism, where you're just not really considering every possible like angle, but at least like trying to put forth better vibes, as people say, just trying to put better frequencies out there of like consideration. It touches other people, and you never really know whether then that can butterfly effect its way to then come back to you and then reinforce the optimism.
And even if it's all bullshit,
Yeah.
it's still worth it, just because it's this thing that you always say, like, you can take the ball and go out there and be like, no, this is where this is reality, everything sucks, but at the end of the day, you're gonna have to bring back the ball and play with everybody.
Yeah,
What
exactly.
you always say, come back with the ball. You're like, we want to play, come back with the ball. And I remember my friend Carson told me this story. I think I don't know if I sent it to you too, about the king, and the king had a stargazer or something like that. Stargazer comes through and he says, "My king, I've received a prophecy, like the grain is gonna go bad. It's gonna turn everybody mad when next harvest, and there's nothing we can do to stop it. Everybody's gonna go insane." It's like, damn. Well, but here we'll save some good grain, and so we can remain sane in this insane world, right? And everybody else is screwed. And then he's like, but what good is it to be the only sane person in an insane world? Look, let's just eat the grain, but mark ourselves. So whenever we see each other, we see our marks, we'll remember we're actually stark raving mad. And that's kind of how it is. Even if the pessimism angle and the nihilist angle is the utmost truth of reality, is like nothing, everything is meaningless, whatever. Who cares? Because everybody apparently is playing this game where they're playing the optimism game, they're playing the hope game. You might as well, because
nothing matters, right? It's like it doesn't, like, you can nest the nihilism within the optimism if you really want to, because you can have optimistic nihilism where it's like nothing matters.
You wouldn't be able to relate too.
Yeah.
How would you be able to play the optimism game if you're not, what I'm, it's the same kind of metaphor I'm saying here, with at least you can play along and you can enjoy this game. If you also join in the insanity, in the illusion,
right? Exactly.
Rather than
if you're a herd animal, already, what difference does it make if it is an illusion, if everybody around you is already living it too?
That's true.
It's like, isn't reality that which continues to iterate itself even when you stop believing in it, right? And it's like, I can stop believing in the conceptualization of like human spirit and us doing better and stuff like that, but other people aren't, and other people are still striving. So it's like me sitting here considering and being like, everybody sucks and all of this sucks, doesn't actually stop the game, right? So at that point, the game, even if it began as an illusion, it becomes real because of its iterability throughout time, and it's just like, it's perpetuation essentially. It becomes more alive as more time goes by.
Yeah, I like that though, what you said. Well, at the end of the day, it's still meaningless. So
Yeah, why not just be the best?
At least just play the game.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly. You're still gonna die. Yeah, nothing's gonna be any different. So you can still be just as nihilistic as you were before.
So maybe the point is to enjoy the illusion, right?
Yeah.
Enjoy the illusion to max. Wrap yourself in the madness of it.
Yeah.
At least you'll know you're mad.
Yeah,
At least
exactly.
You
You
see
can-
the other side.
you
You
can
know
put-
you're playing, and that's what I like about it. Seeing that that part of it and getting wrapped up in all the social games that we play in society, this and that. If you have the perception of knowing that at the end of the day, the ground of truth is that, hey, this probably doesn't matter much. This definitely doesn't matter much.
Yeah.
At least you can always come back to that when you're always getting, like, you get too caught up in the game. You're like, wait a second, we're all fooling ourselves. We're stark raving mad.
Right.
Like, let me calm down and not get too caught up in this.
Yeah, because you
right?
can fall into the pathologies of optimism, where you start thinking that the thing that you're doing right now is the most important thing ever. Yeah.
Right.
And then
You should definitely temper that.
yeah, exactly. Once you get into that inevitable flop, because that feeling breeds vanity too, and it's
Right.
like the vanity then rises you up, only to slap you right back down.
Right.
And it's like, if you have too much optimism and you don't center it with a strong foundation of understanding that,
Right.
like, yeah, okay, you can try, but that doesn't actually mean that any of this actually has meaning.
Right.
Yeah, it's perfect. You can temper yourself to withstand that inevitable fall in some way,
Right.
and it might not even feel like such a fall. It's literally just the valley of your past peak. It's just a continuation of the topography of life, going from one area to another, because you can't exist on a mountain, because then it's a plateau, right? And then it's just the ground.
You're
Yeah.
right. That's true. You need to have the yin and yang per se to really perceive stuff and have experiences. And I think that's the point, to have the experience, even if it's an illusion.
And I think
you experience it, and that way it's real.
yeah, I think that's the most important thing, is that you can be cognizant of your programming. You can understand that, yes, I am a meat machine that goes forward in life, and maybe none of this really matters. But at the same time, there are games out there to be played. There's fun out there to be had, for sure.
Right, definitely.
And shit, that sounds like a good enough reason.
And I think that's
Yeah.
the metaprogramming ability to just remember that you're playing this role, and this role is not defined. It's not like a rigid thing.
Yeah, you're a multi-purpose tool, if you
Right.
really want to think about yourself in
that's
that
true.
aspect.
I think who do you call it? The comedian Jim Carrey actually brought that up because he was saying, especially for actors, because actors have to be a different person,
Right.
and then they're like, who am I really?
Especially if you become like a method actor or something like
Yeah,
that. Like,
and
you
then
always
what
hear
Jim
about
Carrey
that.
was doing, he got really caught up in this. I forgot the specific character, but he just wouldn't get out of it. And a lot of actors do that. Like, they'll just stay in character the whole time. Maybe they're on set, maybe even at home, to really like drive home that performance. And if you lose yourself in someone else's character, then
Heath
you realize
Ledger, man. Yeah, that's
your
what-
character
yeah.
is really flimsy, right? And then you're like, wow, I've just been playing this character. I'm just playing who am I even? How am I going to be normal when I come back from being somebody else? That's really interesting.
Yeah,
with
the walls of
program.
illusion the
Right.
walls of reality become
Then
really,
you
really
realize
thin.
they
Yeah.
are. These are. Let me run this Kevin program. Maybe I can run this if I ever get picked to play. I don't know.
Yeah,
Will Smith
you
program,
can even
know?
imagine that whole aspect of them like dropping their head, and then
Yeah.
like they can put their head back up,
Boot
and
it
it's
up.
like rebooting up as this other
Right.
person.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you realize that's something like what we do. Alan Watts talks about how, I always think life is a big identity crisis for the most part. And you're always, you grow up, when you're a kid, your parents want you to act a certain way. They want you to be somebody. They're like, be yourself. You know what I'm saying? If they see you acting too much like someone else's kid, they're like, no, that's not you. Be you. And you're like, what the fuck
What does that mean? Yeah.
And it's what they're trying to program into you, or whatever they're expecting from you. And you're always in this loop trying to ask yourself, what does it mean to be me? How can I be me more?
Yeah.
How can I define?
And once
this
again,
person?
getting those critiques from your creator.
Right.
You know, it's like, I'm not me. Wait, what do you mean I'm not me? It's like,
Right.
because when you're, I mean, I remember being a kid like that who, you know, I had friends that, you know, did particular things, and I was like, that seems really cool. Like, I'm gonna imitate it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just more like a tribute situation, more than like real imitation. But I would also get those kind of things where my mom and dad would be like, you're acting too much like your friends. You know, it's like you're
Right.
like losing your
That's not
authenticity.
You're not supposed to do that.
And it does create a lot of dissonance in relation to what that, yeah, where do you and your friends, you know, separate and begin, right? It's like if we're all doing the same actions all of the time, and the
One
only
of the biggest insults you can get is someone calling you a phony, right? Not being real.
Right.
He's not real, you know? And so there's always this identity crisis of what does it mean to be you, and what is it, you know?
who's got this handbook that can that they're pulling it out to be like, nope, you're falling off. Yeah, you're falling off what your
Genuineness.
yeah, your genuineness is. Yeah,
Right.
like
But you, at the same time, you realize everybody is, you know, malleable in that there is no actual solid identity, because it can change, you know, as the same way that all your molecules change. Keeping this rigid identity is not something that is necessary. I mean, it's not. It doesn't really. Oh, what's the word?
I don't know, but I mean, to add to that, it's just that there's no legacy iteration, like first initial iteration of yourself that you can then be like, that's me, and I'm diverting away from that aspect of being, right? Because you can't ever pinpoint one aspect of yourself. Because imagine if I pinpointed how I was when I was 15, right? And it's like, that's me. It's like, I should go back to acting like I did when I was 15 in order to be able to remain authentic
Right.
to that mentality. No, right? It's like, but there are people that do that. They get stuck in like one era of their being, and they're like, and because of their worry of seeming like a phony, they're like, I have to continue this iteration
You have
of
to be
being
real.
over and over again. Yeah, I have to be real. Like, they're almost worried that they might like vanish away if they start having new likes and dislikes. Like, no. Fucking.
It is kind of funny that, you know, this is kind of what the game we play.
Yeah.
Am I real?
Yeah, the am I real game all the time. Am I being real?
Am I real? Are you real? What is real? And I wonder, in John C. Lilly's book, he was talking about, you know, if I read it here, I actually wanted to read it. He says, over time, the mind learns to delineate a tangible external reality from sensory inputs. It begins to program cues for behavior, such as crying when hungry or uncomfortable, and through experience and experimentation begins to conceptualize a paradigm of the world and one's place within it. This development happens under the radar of conscious awareness. By the time consciousness or self-awareness develops, the biocomputer has already been programming itself for years. Next come the stages of self-programming and self-metaprogramming that continue for most of the life of a human being. I thought that was really interesting.
For sure, because that's exactly what we want to accomplish with artificial intelligence, right? We want a program that can teach itself.
This emergent conscious self-awareness that'll come.
Like the lotus kind of thing, where like you have the Buddha coming out of the middle of the flower kind of desire.
The ghost developing in the machine somehow. And I thought that was really profound, where something has been writing this character. You're not even aware of it. It's just writing this character while you're you're not even online yet. That's what I always tell my friends. Like, do you know the first time you became online and you knew about yourself and could think about, you know, you have memories from then on. You've identified yourself in time and space. This is me. By that time, there's already been all these processes and information downloaded into. Then you come in and you're like, this is me, I have these desires, and, you know, these are people around me, and this is the world I inhabit. That kind of idea that consciousness can just emerge like
And that's
that
the mystery,
suddenly,
right?
right?
Yeah,
What is that?
especially out of things that are supposedly aren't conscious, right? It's like what's the number of atoms you're supposed to have around in order for them to eventually become like, ooh,
my
well,
God, what are we
now I'm
doing?
conscious. Yeah, it's like is a super heavy rock conscious because it has enough atoms inside of it to be able to do it. It's like what exactly is the parameter again where we actually consider another person a player, right, and not an NPC.
Yeah, and
Or
that's
an
the thing.
asset.
That's why we struggle, especially materialists and scientists, to be like I think they would rather have to explain it away as an illusion. The consciousness is just an illusion, but the problem is, you can't have illusion without consciousness. To really perceive illusion, there has to be consciousness. Like, that's meaning, right? So,
And it has to be an illusion relative to a reality, and it's
Right.
like, what's that reality, right?
yeah, so you just come to that one point where it's really difficult to explain. It's yourself, which is crazy.
Yeah.
Um,
But man, we've been going at it for a long
Yeah.
time. I think I gotta go get dinner ready.
yeah.
But man, the killer thoughts, the knives just kept being slung all over
Yeah,
the
this
place.
is a pretty fun topic, the whole programming aspect, because it's really intrinsic to who we are.
Right. And it's
the
become
mystery of knowing ourselves.
Yeah, and it's becoming more and more wrapped around our normal everyday lives. As more people become savvy with computers, you're able to then begin to understand. You're like, oh my God, that computer acts exactly like I do.
Yeah, it's meta.
Yeah, you can install things into it now. Like there never was an apparatus that we were so akin to before. It's like I can't relate to a hammer. You know, it's like it's a great tool and it works wonderfully, but the hammer and I have nothing in common in relation to that. But now the computer and we have so many things in common because the computer is built around how we're built, because that's the way that the programmers considered the easiest way to go about creating it. So the parallels are wonderful, and this was just another great example of an idea that we've taken to a lethal extreme.
Seriously.
Yeah, but
if anybody's interested, they got to check out John C. Lilly, Programming and Bioprogramming, Programming and Metaprogramming the Human Biocomputer. Really interesting read.
Awesome.
So.
All right, everybody. Yeah, have a nice night.